Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the National Council for Marketing and Public Relations. This is the 8th and final webinar in our free COVID-19 series. Today's topic is on producing engaging videos during COVID-19 and beyond. From NCNPR's National Office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I'm Debbie Halsey. It's my pleasure to serve as Executive Director. And with me behind the scenes is Kim Browning, NCNPR's Associate Director, who's joining us from Boise, Idaho. We hope everyone is doing well. We wish you the very best as you work through summer and head into the fall. And with that, we do have a few housekeeping notes before we get to our presentation. We have created a new NCNPR Facebook group where you can post follow-up questions and comments. You can join the group by searching within Facebook Community College Collaborators COVID-19. And now to today's presentation, let's meet our presenters. As the Director of Video Production at College Inbound and Port City Films out of North Carolina, Curtis Thiemann has written and directed hundreds of projects across the country and has produced content for MTV, Animal Planet, Ralph Lauren, McDonald's, and many others. He and Jonathan Medford have been business partners for more than 15 years, and they've produced Paragon award-winning videos for community and technical colleges across the country, along with NCNPR's Paragon Awards videos for the past 2 years. Curtis has a bachelor's degree in communication from East Carolina University. Jonathan Medford is a lead producer at College Inbound and Port City Films. He's got a knack for finding a good story, planning shoots, finding the right talent and locations, and developing interview questions that get the right conversation started. He also graduated from East Carolina University with a bachelor's degree in communication. Curtis and Jonathan, we are so happy to have you with us. Thank you for making today's presentation.
Hey Debbie, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I hope everyone out there is doing well and staying safe. Thanks for joining us today. Here's a little overview of what we're going to be discussing. The first thing, we're going to talk a little bit about just who we are, why we're here, and tips working with production companies like ours. We're going to talk a little bit about storytelling, when to tell a story and why that's important in every production that you do. We're going to talk a little bit about how we see it, which is just kind of tips and tricks we've put together over the years for all three phases of production, just ways to think about pre-production, production, and post. And then we're going to talk about safety, especially during COVID-19, just ways to stay safe and some things that we're seeing different groups doing as Hollywood and production starts up around the country. Our section 5, we're going to talk a little bit about producing in a pandemic, some things we can think about, some strategies, some ways to maybe get outside the box on what we're able to do and what we could be doing. And then we're going to open it up for questions. We're going to go over, we're going to be including some production forms so people have some templates to help kind of organize your next production. And we're going to do a little Q&A. So at that point, at the very end, you can ask any questions. We're going to keep our presentation very broad. We want to kind of try to appeal to everybody. We understand that different people will have different interests and different levels of knowledge in the field. So we're trying to keep it pretty broad. We'll assume everybody knows how to hit record on an iPhone, and then we'll just talk a little bit about what we do, and hopefully everybody can take some nugget of information out at the end. Let's see, so getting started. So who we are, why we're here, and how to work with folks like us. And there's a huge lightning strike. Anyway, Jonathan and I go back over 25 years. We've been 50-50 business partners for the last 15 of those. Why two companies? To make a long story short, College Inbound was established to focus on web applications and video content developed specifically for two-year colleges and technical schools. While Port City Films, we produce the video content for College Inbound, but we also produce video and animation projects outside the higher education space. We work on TV and film projects, some, but mostly focus on corporate and commercial production around the country. So we're based here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Both companies are based in this area, and that's mostly due to a place called Screen Gem Studios, which is one of the largest studios east of LA. They're based here as well. So that's why we focused our efforts here, and we've been here for just over 15 years now. Over the years, we've produced a variety of content, as Debbie mentioned, for two-year colleges around the country. Some of those projects have even picked up some awards along the way, including a couple Paragon Awards. We produce everything from 3D animations, 2D vectors. We do whiteboard animations, program-specific videos, testimonials, commercials, and we have a template project, or product rather, that's kind of a semi-custom commercial that some of you may be familiar with, that we'll be using screenshots and samples throughout this presentation. We've even done a little awards program over the last 2 years that you may or may not have heard of, a little thing called the Paragon Awards for NCNPR, which we're really proud of, and that's been a fun project as well. All right, so getting into it, there are probably some of you on here who are not going to be handling production hands-on, so we wanted to kind of include something for everybody. Essentially, we recognize that some of you just want to hire a production company and kind of have a better sense of how to work with them. So we're going to go over how to pick a production company, how to set your budget, what to look for in the contract, and then also making sure your production company has what they need to produce a successful project, because that's huge. If it's not a hands-off process, you don't hire somebody to come in and make a project. It's very much a collaborative effort, and just some things to think about if you do go that route of hiring somebody else. So most production companies have websites and social media. You'll obviously want to do some digging. The biggest thing is really make sure you see samples of people's work. You're looking for quality, variety, energy, and story. Obviously you can, reviews are great. You can look on Google and Facebook for some reviews, but really the biggest thing here is look at samples, see what they've done, and make sure that they are the production company of those projects. A lot of people worked on Jurassic Park, not all of them were Steven Spielberg. So, a lot of times people will post videos that they've been a part of, but what part have they been? So, make sure you pay attention to samples, interview them, sit down face to face and talk with them. I'll be honest, some artists, some filmmakers, artists are squirrely. They're not the most social group of people, but that doesn't mean everything. You want to sit down with people and talk to them a little bit about their history, their team, their approach, and but you're trying to balance their experience with the quality of work, and then you can go into request a quote. So what you want to do is pick when you go to request a quote, you want to pick your top 2 or 3 prospects, and let them know that you're out there, you're shopping around, you want to get a quote for video production, but you want to share the same information with each one, and you don't want to waste anybody's time. So just pick the people that you feel comfortable working with, request a quote, and you can learn more about how they structure things. Usually the cream rises to the top. So usually you'll get a sense of who is giving you the most information, who you're the most comfortable with. But as these dialogues continue, usually you'll get a sense of the people that you want to go with. And that comes to the last point, trust your gut. Essentially, if you see too many red flags with somebody, if they're late to the meeting, if they're not, if they don't seem organized, if they don't seem like they're on the same page, they understand the story that you're trying to tell, trust your gut. You want to make sure that, video production is a collaborative medium, and you want somebody you can work with. You want somebody who understands the industry, understands storytelling, but also is easy to work with, who isn't a liability, who does a solid thing. So that's our kind of first step. Once you get past that level, we're getting into the budgets. Oftentimes people ask need things like, how much is a commercial? And I always respond, I usually respond with, how much is a house? You know, are we talking about a birdhouse? Are we talking about a mansion? They're very different things. So, you know, we've made 30-second commercials for $6,000. We've made 30-second commercials for $60,000. You know, there are a lot of variables when it comes to location, props, talent, how many days are you shooting, how big is your crew. There's just a lot of variables. You know, even going down to equipment, there are different cameras you could be using. You could use everything from an iPhone to Alexa. You could use, yeah, you know, so it's really a matter of, as an artist, you know, we always want to get the most we can because then we have the most resources. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot, you have a better product if you can put together a big crew and you can tell a story. The more corners you cut, the more you're jeopardizing quality. But essentially, there are two ways to find your budget. Either you give the production company a budget and they can work backwards from there, or you can use specs. You can say, hey, I found this other video. Here's an example of the type of video we want to make, and it'll be in this same space. So they need something from you. They either need to know what the budget is and they can work backwards, or they need to know what type of video do you want to make. I need to know the quality, or I need a script and a story, and then I can work backwards. But it's really hard to go to a production company and just say, hey, we need a video. It's going to be 3 minutes long, because they don't know if that means 10 days of shooting or 1 day of shooting. There's just a lot of variables. So you want to be clear. Those are the kind of two approaches, either working backwards or using examples and using the information that for the story that you want to tell. And finally, the contract. Once you get into the contract phase, there's just a few things to look for. When you're doing a contract with a production, every contract I've ever seen is completely different, structured different, laid out different lengths. I've seen everything from a paragraph to 6 pages. Some things you want to look for are, number one, you want to break up payments. So in general, our contracts, we usually do 50% up front. That way everybody has skin in the game, and that allows us to do the production. And then we'll do the other 50% once everything's delivered. But that way you're not asking somebody, especially production companies that are often small businesses, to come in, use a lot of resources. Productions can be very expensive things. You want to have everybody have skin in the game, but you also don't want to give people full budgets right out front and then worry about motivating them to try to get it finished. Another thing you want to see in the contract is a breakdown of services and parameters. So you want to see, what are you getting from a location, you know, how many shoot days, how much crew, what kind of gear are you getting? You want a general breakdown of services. If there's animation or graphics involved, what exactly are you getting for within your contract? Another thing you want to make sure you have in there is rounds of revisions, because odds are the first edit that they give you, it's not going to be a home run. It's not going to be exactly as you want it. So you want to make sure you can do rounds of revisions, and that's included within the price, so you're not going over budget for every little thing. So another thing is deliverables. What exactly is the deliverable? Am I looking for a 2-minute video? Am I looking for a 2-minute and then a 60-second version? Whatever that is, that needs to be laid out in the budget. And finally, rights to any original content. So if you hire somebody to make a commercial, to make a program video, whatever it is you're looking for, what we recommend is that in the contract it says that at the end of it, they give you full rights to all content produced. So anything they shot, any audio that they recorded, any graphics they created, all that should be your property, should be in your possession once the contract's fulfilled. So once the final invoice is sent, that should be yours to do with as you choose. And we'll go into that a little bit later, how to reuse some content. But those are just some things to look for during a contract. So, and finally, and this is a big one that I talk to a lot of people about, but what they need to succeed. A lot of times we'll be brought in to do a project, and if you know your community college, you know your technical school more than the production company. So share everything that you can to help them understand your culture, put together the story that will best speak to your target market, and put together a production that is going to work for exactly what you need. The first thing, scripts and outlines. This is a huge thing. You cannot oversell it. Make sure that you have a script, even if you're doing an interview style or you're doing a documentary style, you should still outline a script based on what you would ideally capture. So having that script allows you to go into the production with an outline of what your goals are to get. If I get a line about this, if I get a line about this, they'll go together like this because I've got a roadmap. But going into it, so many people will just say, well, let's just sit this person down and sit this person down, and we'll just go in and we'll interview them, and they'll say something amazing, and it'll all fit together. Well, sometimes that works, most of the time that does not. So at least have some kind of outline for what you intend to get when you go into that, because it's not always going to come out on the day. Logistics are something that the production company is going to need your help with, especially having shot on many campuses ourselves. It's hard. We usually will do a location scout. We'll usually do several meetings, but in the end, we need help to put together schedules, talent, locations, anything you can help with. It will definitely facilitate the process because being on campus, exactly what it is that you guys have access to, and that'll help the production company. Let's see. So brand guidelines. This is a big thing that people don't think about. But if you start a project with a production company, first thing, give them brand guidelines. Give them, ideally vector versions of any graphics that you guys are using for marketing purposes. Give them logos, ideally vector format. But that way they know exactly if they're going to do any graphics or elements. They understand your color schemes, they understand your fonts, they know exactly what to incorporate. That actually helps during the shoot too, so it's good to get it during pre-production, because that way when they go into it, they understand background. Like if you're setting up a background and it's against a green background but your school colors are blue, stuff like that, little things like that. Everything in video production is a layer, so get them everything you can, any ammunition that they can use to better layer the project around your brand is a good thing. And finally is communication. Video production is a collaborative process, so always make sure they have all the information that they have. As a producer, we work with such a wide variety of different clients that it's hard to just wrap your head around a specific client, their industry, and everything within a small period of time. So a lot of times you want to just make sure that they have a good understanding, and make sure you're communicating throughout the process. So pre-production, production, and post, make sure that they are understanding what the goals are of the video, and make sure that that's translated throughout.
One thing I like to point out too is that these things needed for success are true whether you're hiring and working with a video production company or whether you're doing these productions in-house. And we're going to talk a lot about some in-house strategies later on in the presentation as well.
Great. All right, so storytelling. When to tell a story with your production. Hint, always. So your brain on story. This is one of the only slides. I'm just going to read it. When you watch and or listen to a production, an investigation begins. Every word, sound, and image is part of a puzzle that forms a story in your mind. Use whatever you can in your frame and in your audio to provide as many puzzle pieces as possible for your audience. So productions that are 15 seconds and 15 minutes play by the same rules. There's always a story to be told, and it's your job to find those pieces. So essentially, it's so important to know how people think about a project. A lot of times when we do an edit, I'll show it to 3 or 4 people who know nothing about what they're watching, and then I'll just ask them, what did you retain? And it's so interesting to hear how they have different points of views, how they have different thoughts on what happened. You know, they say that everybody who reads a book sees a different story, and that's because those little investigators in our minds are paying attention to different puzzle pieces, if that makes sense. So we all try to build a story. Well, with video production, we need to remember that everything that you see, everything that you hear is informing people of what they need to know about this story. So there's a lot of approaches to storytelling, but this is generally kind of how we think about it, since we have to boil it down in 5 minutes. Obviously, a story is a series of events, generally a beginning, middle, end. Hang in there, I know this is basic. Those don't necessarily have to come in order. If you get into an edit or you're writing a script, play with the moving parts, try starting something with the ending and just see if that is interesting. See if that is something that engages you faster. You know, the key to storytelling is hooking people as soon as you can, because in today's society with the short attention spans and the short media formats, we've got 15 seconds, we have a minute max, you know, to really grab people. So you want to make sure that you're hooking people right away, and just making sure that you are moving from one thing to another. So it's not just story is not just a series of events, it's also an evolution. It doesn't need to be a roller coaster, but you know that your story needs to have peaks and valleys. Try to do something that increases the stakes at some point, so that it's not a flat line piece of information. It's not just this is a thing, this is the thing, this is the thing. We want to have a progression. We want to have growth. You know, valleys are fine, but you want to have peaks as well. So another thing is evoke emotion. I'm not saying anybody should be laughing hysterically or crying uncontrollably at the end of your campus tour video, but try to find some way to link or relate to your target market. Emotion can come from a lot of places, but relating to your audience is the best place to start. All right, so here's some general tips that we try to include, or I guess that we try to think about when we're putting a story on screen. So the first thing is give your viewers credit. You don't have to explain everything to your viewers. Remember, they're putting together a puzzle in their minds. So you don't have to start every scene with somebody walking in a door saying who they are. This is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is the end. You know, jump into something. This is the commercial we did for Wayne Community College a few years back, and we start with a fire. You know, we didn't show how the fire started. It doesn't matter. It's just jump into something, and that makes it more interesting than just starting at the beginning of something. Show, don't say. So this is an example of, it's a little bit on the same lines, but you've got, with this medium, you have audio and you have video. Use both of them. So don't just talk about what's happening, show what's happening. Use both of those things to tell your story equally, and that way, because people are getting information from both layers. So, you know, obviously we don't have any audio here, but we can see a little girl who's watching her house burn down essentially, and a fireman who came over to comfort her. So you could even assume more of the story just from watching this, but everybody's building their own story, and do what you can to use both the visual and the audio to create those puzzle pieces that we've talked about. Another thing is move along. Welcome to the social media age. The average shot, you know, is about 1.5 to 2 seconds. I think with the new TikTok era, it's probably -3 seconds. I don't know. That gives me anxiety. But anyway, we don't want to hold on things too long. You want to hit and move. It takes about 1 second to 1.5 seconds for people to process what's on screen. Once you can process it, move on. If you can avoid staying on things for too long, that's best, because it'll hold interest, it'll keep people captivated, and the hope is to get them through to the end of your story. Give me stakes and then up them. So, don't just tell me things. This goes back to the peaks and valleys. Build intrigue, build interest. So a lot of times this is done in the edit, but this is also done on the page. So try to take something and evolve it into something else. So in this commercial, this was about little kind of kids that have that aha moment and they figure out what they want to do in life. And we flash back from the point that they're training at their college or technical school to that aha moment that they had when they were kids. So, just make sure you have evolution. Make sure you have something changing to another thing, and that varies. This is all very broad again, but storytelling, we could do a whole hour on that, and we don't have it. So, and this is just something that I like to think about, and we're calling it coming for the real thing. Get up close and personal. One time we went on a shoot, and I was going over our shots with the DP, and he was looking at the shot list, and he was like, well, all this is close-ups. And I told him, I was like, I don't want any wide shots on this, because I just, for that story specifically, I wanted people to always kind of wonder where we're going next, always think about very specifically what we're showing them. So, don't be afraid. So many people do productions and they just shoot wide of everything. They want to make sure everybody sees everything. They want to make sure once you start shooting tights and you start shooting closer up shots, you can really focus in. I mean, literally focus in where people's attentions are, making sure that story is not confused, and you're really directing people from A to B to C. So if you're telling a story and you find yourself on a commercial, or you find yourself doing a documentary style video, one easy thing to do is just step back and say, let's get in close. Let's get some super tight shots, because when you can look in another human being's eyes, you can really put yourself in their shoes. And, as removed as social media and media are, because you're looking at a screen, that's the closest you can get to like a personal connection. So I highly recommend that. We do that in almost all our projects at some point, but it's something from a storytelling standpoint that it's kind of a magical thing when you get up close, what people start to feel, and you start seeing a little bit more of an evolution. So, all right, so how we see it. So these are just tips on how we think about the 3 phases of production. So let's see. So there's, obviously pre-production, production, and post-production. To us, the most important thing is pre-production, because that is where you have absolute control over everything. You, plan, and then plan some more. But the more time you spend there, the better your project's gonna be. So many times, and by so many, I mean 75% of our projects, our clients or the people we're working with want to just move through pre-production. They're like, we'll just show up and just bring your cameras and it's going to be great. The more you can spend here, the better your project will be. And I can't overstate that enough. But anyway, obviously production and post-production are also very important, but I gave pre-production 1 more percent point. But anyway, production, we're going to go over production, just some things we do on set. Some things that, when you're in it, it becomes a time crunch, and it's just a constant battle against time, and you have to rely on the pre-production that you did to get the most that you can to tell your story. So then we'll go over post-production, just a little bit of the process of how we approach post-production, how we tell stories. Obviously, stories are told in pre-production, but those stories can evolve in post-production or in production, and then you can find them in post. But, pre-production, whole point of this slide, pre-production is the most important, and don't think otherwise. Let's see. So, all right, I know we've already kind of touched on this, but, scripts. always make sure you have a script. I can't overstate that, because so many people will just go into a production, and even if it's, I'm doing an interview with somebody I don't know, just create an outline of what the elements you want, or ideally what they would say, and just try to get that out on the day. So another thing is shot list. I don't think we've talked about shot list. I mean, it's exactly what it is. It's a list of your shots. But what that does is, when you're able to sit back and without any pressures, when you're in pre-production, you can take your time to make a list of every visual that you would want in that production, making sure that you don't miss any insert, where if it's like, oh, I need to see somebody pick up a cell phone, put that in. Every little shot should be in your shot list. This is one of this and script template are some of the things we're including in our kind of freebies at the end. But a shot list is super important, you know, just to make sure you can kind of check things off as you go. That way you don't get in post-production and you're like, oh, we forgot to get that one shot of that guy because we talked about him talking to the girl. Well, if everything's in the shot list, you can literally kind of check it as you go. And, you know, if you run out of time, you can kind of work backwards. But at least you'll know what you have. And really, again, that's for a roadmap. You wouldn't go on a hike without some kind of map of the landscape. You know, this is going into an environment saying, I know this works because I've worked it out on paper. So let's try to get that, and then we can get some on top. And you know, then your editor will thank you. So, or you'll thank yourself if you're editing your own stuff. But anyway, next part is no budget, ask around. I can't even tell you how many times we've been doing a shoot and we've come up to a situation, or we just didn't have the budget, and somebody's bailed us out, who, you know, I'll go to a restaurant and be like, hey, we're doing this video for this company or this organization. We don't have a budget, but we need to shoot a scene in a restaurant. And they'll be like, come on in, you can shoot it this time. I'll make you some food. Here's this. And it's like, wait, just so you know, I can't pay you. But you'd be amazed how people love storytelling. People love production. And you don't know until you ask. I'm not suggesting to use this approach as your A, because the bottom line in my eyes is, if somebody's giving you something and there's a budget, you should try to do what you can. But if you run out, if you absolutely hit a wall, like ask for help. If you don't have much talent, if you don't have, you know, the props you need, like, there have been times I put it on Craigslist or Facebook, like, hey, we're doing this thing, and it's always overwhelming, the amount of people who are like, hey, I'll help. Hey, I'm not doing anything. Hey, you know, you could use my dad's, you know, beach house, whatever. It's just, there's just no, it's a easy way to better up your production quality without upping your budget.
And when people know that it's for the local community college, they're so much more apt to help you out as well.
Right. Absolutely. So you know, don't be afraid to ask if you're trying to do a project and you need a warehouse, if you need whatever, like, you know, get out there and ask. You'll be so surprised at the outcome. I'm not saying everybody's going to open their doors, you know, because that's not the case, but you might be surprised. So the other thing is research and borrow. There's a saying in Hollywood, good filmmakers borrow, great filmmakers steal. But essentially, if you're making a video for programs, if you're making a video for just a general commercial, watch other things. Watch other things that have been really good. Watch other things that really speak to you. Watch things that you want your piece to kind of be that example. You know, watch those Paragon Award winners, right? And see what they did. I'm not saying, you know, obviously you don't steal their script, you don't steal, you know, their footage, but look at their shots, look at the composition, look at how they frame things up, look at how they deliver things, and try to use that in your own way. Try to make that your own. You know, that's what Hollywood is. And not, you know, but not that you're making Back to the Future 4, but I'm just saying that try to you know, do as much research. If it's lighting, you know, composition or style, you know, there are things out there that you can pull from. So check out other stuff, and that can really help develop your project. Storyboards. We're not getting into storyboards much today. I love them and we use them for our commercials and we use them whenever we can. Essentially, a storyboard is a series of pictures that help visually plan out your story when you're pre-visiting it. But this is easy to do in like Google Slides or PowerPoint. We're also providing a template for this. But it's one of those things that if you can do it, if it makes sense for your project, do this, because you can put together your wide, your medium, and your close shots. You can see how they cut together. It's just a easy way to kind of sketch things out. This is just one I found randomly on Google. I'm not going to show you the storyboards that I sketch personally. They are terrible. But when I'm on set, I can look at the framing I want, and I know how it's going to cut with the next thing. Some of our best projects, we had a storyboard for, and when you go back and you look at the piece of paper, it is almost shot for shot exactly as the piece of paper shows. And those are our award-winning projects. Those are the projects we're most proud of because we had time to practice them. We knew it would work, then we just went out and made it happen. It's one of those things that you can't always use storyboards, which is why I'm not really going over these in detail, but it's, if you're doing a documentary, it's not going to work. If you're doing just interviews, it's not really going to work. But if you're doing a commercial, if you're doing something set, I'd advise try to use a storyboard, and it can definitely help. So, all right, so that's pre-production. So production, there's really 4 things to think about. Well, there's a million things to think about. These are things that we recommend spending a little bit of time on. So if you've got a camera in hand, or if you have a production company doing what you need them to do, there are 4 shots. There's the wide, the medium, the close-up, and then the creative. You might get, essentially the idea is everything you go to shoot, try to do multiples. Try to shoot a medium and a close-up, or if you have time, shoot all 4 of these for every shot that you're going to get. And that gives your editor a lot more flexibility. Once you start telling your story, you'll be surprised the difference of when you need a close-up or when you need a wide shot, having those in the can will present. So those are kind of just the 4 things to think about when you're in production. The next thing is key. We could do a 5-hour thing on lighting. I've got a friend that did one, but essentially make sure there's a primary source of light when you're doing interviews, especially when you have this is just kind of like if I was doing a documentary style, or if I was doing anything where a person's talking on camera. This is a little bit of a chart on if you have one light, where you'd put it, where camera would be, where the subject would be. What I usually try to do is get kind of a 2/3 lighting. I set up a light higher than his eyes, and try to make sure, obviously the left side of his face is completely illuminated. The right side, we try to have the fallout on the corner of his eye. So both of his eyes are lit, and then the light kind of falls away. That's in a nutshell how I think about our key light, our primary light. Again, we could talk for a long time about lighting and styles and backlights and fills and bounces, but this is in my opinion, if you have one light, put it up high. If you look, because we're at about a 45-degree angle, we can see, if you look closely into the gentleman's eyes, you can see the reflection of the light. That's called an eye light. So you see a little twinkle in his light, in his eyes. They're not just solid brown, and it also illuminates his face nicely. So this is if you have one light, a window. Ideally, it's a big, wide, soft light. If you're going to do a lot of interviews, obviously it's important to look up 3-point lighting and what that means, and then play with it. Just practice some, do some tests. But essentially, this is what to think about if you when you're doing interviews and stuff. Audio is half the battle. That's the whole thing. So many people just say, "Hey, we got this camera. Let's go make this thing." Audio can really take you out of a story. Make sure you get the microphone as close to your subject's mouth as possible, or the audio source, whatever it is. If it's up top, if it's down low, don't underestimate what audio will do for your project. So make sure that if you can have a separate mic, I don't care if it's recorded separate. I don't care if you have a XLR running the camera. Anything you can to get that mic away from camera and into the person's, into the audio source, that's best. And then everything in frame. You know, in the end, once you've set up your key light, you've set up your audio, step back, look at the framing, look at where the person is in the frame. You know, you've already watched those other videos that you really liked, and you know what? Take screenshots of those, bring those to set. So you know what those are. You know, this is a rule of thirds. This is general framing, but look at everything in your frame. Look at the foreground, look at the background. Make sure there's good balance. You know, blur your eyes and just look at what items are popping from a color standpoint, and just, you know, the biggest thing I can say here is don't be lazy. You know, when you step back and you see a poster taped on the wall in the background and it looks bad, just run back and pull it down. You know, do the small things. Throw a plan in the background. Do those things that take 2 seconds that in the end will, you know, once you've filmed it, you filmed it. So you're already there. Take 2 seconds to just adjust right before you hit record. Look at your frame and just take it in. Just what here will I get mad at later when I'm sitting at my computer and wishing I had changed. So that's essentially that. Now we're going into post-production. So post-production, this is just kind of our process. So with post-production, first thing that we do is we import everything, we sync it up, and a lot of the editing systems will sync up your audio and your video if you record them separately. If not, we use a product called Pluralize. It's made by Red Giant, and that does a great job of syncing our audio and video. But it's essentially get all your content in there and pull your selects. You know, just work off your good footage. So pull out your best takes, pull out your best footage, your best audio, make sure all that stuff's together, because when you start diving into the edit, you only need to be looking at your good stuff. Don't delete your bad stuff, because you might need to dive back in later. You might say, oh my gosh, this doesn't work. I need another take, and go back into it. But when you're doing the edit, just put all that stuff on a separate timeline and a separate folder, whatever you need to do. Focus on your selects. Focus on the best of what you've done, and that way you're just working in that world of your best stuff. The next step is laying out your entire story. So we'll do it in a linear fashion. We'll just tell the story from beginning, middle, and end. We just lay it down. It might be a 30-second commercial, and we're laying down a 7-minute thing. That's not unlike us. But we want to put down everything that we could possibly want to use. You know, if I'm not saying all your selects, because your selects might be a couple of the same shot of a plant, but you lay down one of everything that you'd want to use, you tell the story, and then you can go into the rough cut. So rough cuts is super important. Here's where, as an editor, it becomes fun, because you've seen this story in a linear fashion. Now you can have fun on how to tell that story within the framework of what you have. So if you have 30 seconds, how do you tell that story within 30 seconds? You can start playing with, you know, putting the ending first. What happens when he says this bombshell moment, or we have essentially the conclusion, and then we go back and transition into, you know, what happened before. You know, build in. This is another way for the peaks and valleys. Like, build intrigue. Don't feel like you have to just have everything beginning, middle, end. But the rough cuts is where you can, you know, a lot of times we'll do 2 and 3 versions of videos. We'll say, hey, here's if we tell it this way, here's if we tell it this way, and then we'll show it to people who don't have working knowledge of that project, and we'll say, what did you get out of that? What do you understand here? What do you feel about this? Because kind of A/B testing, right? So it allows us to see just what you know, what might be the best path for our story. And the last thing about our post-production is be willing to kill, not just in general, but your darlings. Any filmmakers out there would recognize that term. But always be willing to kill your darlings. It might be the best shot, best line. It might be the thing that when you shot it, you were like, oh, that's beautiful. But the bottom line, if it doesn't serve your story, if it doesn't get you where you need to be, if it doesn't help, you got to take it out. It might be something you can bring back later. It might be something you can bring back in another project, but be willing to kill your darlings. Just the bottom line is when you sit down to that edit, be true to the story. You want to put the story that is going to speak to the audience and accomplish your goals. And if things don't work within that, you can't be afraid to take them out. So, all right. So those are just ways we approach pre-production, production, and post, and some things to think about. I know I feel like I'm going really fast, but there's so much that you can dive into each one of these things. So if you guys have any other questions, like, let us know at the end. We'll try to address those. These are a couple. I know that closed captioning is very important. These are some services that we've used in the past. Rev.com, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. It's transcriptions, closed captions, and translations, where a person actually goes through and transcribes it, and there's customizations that you can make so that they can give you what you need. Temi.com, it's kind of speech to text recognition software. What Temi does is it's a lot cheaper. I think it's
25 cents.
It's like 25 cents a minute. So if you have like an hour-long presentation where the president of the community college is talking to everybody and you need to transcribe this, Temi.com is a great way to approach it. If you have good audio, that's important, because essentially it's the same like talk to text on your phone. It uses that technology to auto transcribe everything. So if it's, we usually use Rev.com, but if we have something that's really long format, like an hour and a half, and we just need like an outline of what it is, we use Temi. But Rev's super accurate, and it's also a really reasonable price. But those are kind of the services we use to get the files. Once you get the file, this is a little bit of a breakdown of how to import closed captions, or how to create the closed captions in your video. YouTube is pretty straightforward. In the video manager, you just select the video and click edit. Subtitles in English or whatever the language you're going for, and then it'll generate the captions. Premiere Pro and Final Cut, these are we just picked these two because they're the most popular video editing softwares. Obviously with closed captioning, it's pretty widespread now, especially with the ADA compliance. So just Google whatever you need there, but those are just services and processes we use for closed captioning. So let's see. So next, Jonathan's going to talk to you a little bit about video production safety with COVID-19 and some strategies that we can use while producing during this pandemic. So.
All right, thank you, Curtis. Obviously, safety always comes first, but in this presentation, it happens to be fourth. Seriously, though, I want to talk with you guys about pandemic safety while on set, and then transition into video marketing strategies during this pandemic. Just to make it clear, we do not represent ourselves as safety experts, but we have studied what others in our industry are doing during this time, and we have adopted several things that work well for keeping our team and our clients safe, and stuff that you can do on your end. So we've compiled a list of 9 tips for a COVID-safe video shoot. Number 1, our sets look a little bare these days. To achieve a high level of production value, it takes a talented team of individuals. Before COVID, our sets would typically have a crew of 7 to 10 people, which include roles like director of photography, director, lighting and grip, sound mixer, boom operator, producer, hair and makeup, production assistants. We have really scaled back to manage these shoots with just 3 people who are doing multiple jobs, which is, in all reality, is what you're used to doing at a community college environment anyway. So it can be a challenge, and if we have multiple locations or multiple setups, it really slows down our speed of production. Number 2, the night before our shoots, we're asking all of our crew members, clients, and interviewees, the talent, to record their own temperatures the day before and the morning of the shoot. When everyone shows up on set, we also have one of those contactless thermometers to scan everyone's temperature as a basic precaution. Each state has different criteria for what constitutes a fever. The range that we have seen out there is typically between 99.5 and 100.4 degrees. The reports we have seen show that coronavirus can survive on objects anywhere from 4 hours to 3 days, depending on the material. So most of our shoots these days are spread out at least 3 days apart. So equipment cleaning has not been a major concern for us. If we happen to have a back-to-back shoot, we do sterilize all of our equipment using Clorox wipes or a cloth with a 70% alcohol solution. Obviously, knowing how often we all touch our phones and people like to bring their phones on set and put them on silent, but we're asking everyone on set to sterilize their phones at the very beginning of the day. Before entering the location, our crew puts on brand new sterile mask, which is not optional. We make everybody do that mandatory. And we also have brand new gloves, which are optional because we do a lot of hand washing. We also provide spare masks, gloves, sanitizing wipes, tissues, and hand sanitizer to everybody on set, including our clients and interviewees. So that's something that we would recommend that you guys do as well. Hands are carefully sanitized once per hour on location, which is in accordance with CDC guidelines. At least at some point it was part of the guidelines. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out and interacting with people and I touch something, I feel the need to sanitize just about every time. So we're constantly sanitizing on set. Our goal is to minimize unnecessary contact. The interviewee or the talent should stay out of the room during the setup of the shot. If the shot needs to be adjusted, we're asking the talent to leave the room so that we can maintain proper social distancing. Talent should keep their mask on until it's time to roll. You guys probably don't do a whole lot or focus on hair and makeup when you're doing your in-house video productions, but it's something that's very important on our end. We always like to have a hair and makeup artist on set, but for right now, we aren't having hair and makeup on set for the most part. Depending on the production, we do provide the option for people to have our makeup artist remote in via Zoom. For audio, we like to use a boom pole that's set up on a C-stand, just like the one in this photo. And but we also like to have that backup audio using the lavalier microphone. And so we're just kind of teaching people how to self-place a lavalier on them. And typically that's something before COVID we would do ourselves. So that's a little bit different. And last but certainly not least, while on set, we do our very best to maintain a social distance of 6 feet. So as much as I am tired of hearing this phrase, the new normal, it is unfortunately the reality that we're faced with today. And despite all that's going on in the world, your schools need good marketing now more than ever. This is not the time to take your foot off the gas pedal, even when your gut is telling you you need to hit the brakes. Marketing must go on, especially video marketing. I'm not going to go over a lot of statistics on the importance of video marketing because I think we all understand the importance of video in our digital media and our social media campaigns. But what I want to focus on are easy video production strategies you guys can implement today despite our current global situation. We think you should start at the basics. We had a client that needed a new spot to reflect a new message, but was not able to shoot any new footage. When we went through their library of videos we've done for them over the years, we were really pleasantly surprised with the amount of footage we had to be able to cut their new spot together with a new message, a fresh voiceover. Give that a try. Go through your old video footage. You might be surprised what you can put together. Curtis gave you many examples today on how to improve the quality of your productions, but we also want you to realize that this is a worldwide pandemic. People are going to be much more forgiving and understanding when it comes to the quality of what you're putting out there because everybody is at home. If you look at great examples, Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, they're all doing their shows from home. Everyone knows that they're in their living rooms and their kids are running around in the background. But there's something incredibly endearing about it. It's something very relatable that makes us feel like we're not alone. And that alone should give you the confidence to get out of your comfort zone and see what you can do on your own if you have to. Most of us already have video production equipment in our pockets. Smartphones can take some really amazing video footage these days, and they can really expedite the process of getting a video to a finished product. To get the best quality out of your smartphone production, we have just a few tips. Number one, be sure to use a tripod with a smartphone holder. Anyone who's ever shot with a cell phone over a long period of time knows that arm fatigue is a real thing. Plus, this will greatly reduce camera shake issues. And this is a real pet peeve of mine, but you want to shoot the footage horizontally so that the picture fills up the entire screen. If not, you're going to have those large black bars on the left and right side of the video on some important platforms. There are platforms like Instagram that like the square video format, but your horizontal video can always crop down to those platforms, but you can't go backwards the other way. And like Curtis said earlier, audio is incredibly important. Don't just rely on the onboard microphone available on your phone. You're going to be sorely disappointed, especially in an interview situation. You can buy a really cheap lavalier microphone. It'll clip directly to your cell phone, and you clip it to your interviewee, the person you're interviewing. And if you're using an iPhone, you're going to want to get a little adapter like the one that's pictured here on the right. And for our cell phone video production tips, the last one, be sure to shoot your video while in airplane mode. You don't want to be in the middle of your best take and get interrupted by phone calls, text, and other notifications. Closely related to smartphone video production is the fact that you can use your smartphone to reach your audience with video immediately using live streaming. We love live streaming for several reasons. Number one, it helps build trust with your brand. This unedited, unpredictable, uninterrupted approach to video offers a certain charm as it presents the on-screen talent in an authentic and genuine way. The immediate and unpredictable nature of live video draws more attention and compels viewers to interact with the content, be it a like, a comment, or a share. From here, the word about the live show spreads as new viewers tune in. Putting more live content out there means receiving more attention for your brand. Number four, too often we think of colleges as institutions. When you hear and see a live personality representing your brand is automatically gives your institution a relatable personality. A live stream is instantaneous. So when you hit that go live button and it's finished the moment you stop recording it. So it cuts out an incredible amount of work that goes into an edited production. And finally, live streaming gives you instant feedback on what your audience likes. So if you're not doing live streaming today, we highly recommend that you do so. If you're doing live streaming as well, you want to repurpose your video content instantly on multiple platforms. You can utilize multi-streaming to reach a wider audience by streaming to multiple platforms at the same time. We like to use a service called Restream to do this. We've used Restream to stream live to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and cable TV all at the same time. And the great thing about that is you don't have to worry about having the bandwidth to stream to multiple places. Restream handles that on your end. So as long as you're giving them a good feed, they can take it and run with it. If you plan to do a live stream of an event like a graduation and you want to step it up a notch with multiple camera views and audio inputs, vMix is a great solution to help you pull this off. I use this system personally all the time, and it's incredibly easy to use. You just have to have the right computer set up, but once you have that, they have free versions of their software. I highly recommend the HD version of their software. It's a one-time fee of $350, and it's well worth the money. It's like having a live production truck inside your computer. And we're all marketers here, and you all know how difficult it is to get people in front of a camera. And I think one positive thing from this pandemic is the fact that people have really opened up to the idea of putting themselves on camera and participating in video conference calls. Lately, we've all have utilized platforms like Zoom and Google Meet and others to connect with friends and coworkers. You can utilize a platform like Zoom to record one-on-one interviews with current students, successful alumni, program faculty, and college administration. So you don't have to think of Zoom as a live platform. that record button is there for a reason. So record the call, edit if necessary, and post it to your various platforms. There was a two-year college in Florida that I know did a series of whiteboard animation videos for each one of their programs. I couldn't find it before this presentation, but they were really, really well done. Animation is great during the pandemic because you don't have to worry about crew. In-person shoots are not required, and they could be quicker to watch. We have a full-time animator on staff for our custom animations we do, but don't let budgets or your perceived lack of know-how limit you there. There's some great resources out there like animaker.com that make it really easy to create simple animated videos. So that's something you could definitely implement soon. Stock footage is another thing to consider. I know we all like to avoid using stock images if at all possible, but sometimes they can be really convenient when you are in a pinch. Adobe Stock is a popular site where you can get stock images, but they also sell stock videos. And so a short 9-second clip like this one right here cost around $80. But when you consider the amount of crew it took to pull off a shot like this, it could be well worth the money. And for our last slide, before we go into our Q&A section, one product that we launched through College Inbound a couple of years ago was a semi-customizable video template ad that was produced, shot, and edited by us and made specifically for two-year colleges in mind. It can be customized to reflect the look and feel of your school. You can choose from a variety of different program-specific footage and provide us the voiceover script you want. And then within a week or so, we have a spot that looks and feels authentic to your school, but without the hassle of producing a professional video. So if you have interest in that, you can go to collegeinbound.com/videos. And with that, in our next slide, we have some great information on some freebies that we will make easy for you guys, make it easier for you guys to do your next in-house production. But before we get to that, we'd like to check in with the folks at NCMPR and see if we have any questions.
All right, very good, Curtis and Jonathan. We do have a couple of questions coming that have come in during the presentation. I will encourage those who are still online with us to add questions to the questions box. Now is the time to post your questions. So let's get started, and then we'll close it up with a few final comments from Curtis and Jonathan, and with a couple of final housekeeping notes from NCMPR. So the first question that came in, you hadn't touched on yet, but it was all about captioning, and that is a big deal for colleges across this country, is making their videos closed caption. And you did talk about a couple of products. I wonder if there's anything else you might want to talk about. There had been a question posted on NCMPR's Designers and Photographers Facebook group about closed captioning and how time consuming it can be, especially if it's a video created by another party that you're asked to post.
Yes.
And the ROI will be limited. So can you talk a little bit more about those two products, and will they translate to the multiple platforms? I think you touched on that as well: YouTube, Instagram, perhaps TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we really like about transcription is we like to think of it beyond closed captioning. You can actually use this as blog post material. So every time we produce we have a podcast on through collegeinbound.com, and every time we produce a podcast, we send it off to timmy.com or rev.com, get it transcribed, and all of a sudden that transcription becomes content that is indexable and searchable in search engines. And so it's all about repurposing content. So we highly recommend those services because it's not just for the closed captioning, it's also great SEO value and content and repurposing. Timmy, I think, is great. It's I think rev.com is about $1.25 per finished minute, and Timmy is 25 cents per finished minute. Timmy will transcribe it automatically, but it's not perfect, but it also gives you the tools to be able to go through, and you can actually play your video within the platform, and it highlights what is being said on the screen. And so you can make edits to it as well. But both platforms make it easy to create those files that you need to implement on the various platforms.
Okay, very good. Another next up question, you did give some good lighting tips, and there's an additional question about perhaps tips you might have about glare from glasses. How do you do to prevent that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing, especially when you're talking about like a key light. Polarized filters for your lenses, those are a must. I highly recommend people to get decent polarized filters, because minimal glare, it's really easy to kind of dial that in. But when you're coming up to, a lot of times we'll see that bright green glare, and that's actually kicked off by a chemical that's used in glasses. So the light might be blue, but it looks like just a green square. It's tough. So it varies. A lot of times I'll get my light up as high as I can. I'll try to make it as soft as the source as possible. So I'll try to get some kind of diffusion to put closer to the talent, back the light up. And then, we'll try to use bounces to help fill in the light. And then we try to keep their chin down, because that at least gets us above eye level. And, any interviews you see on TV, if you watch Good Morning America and you watch, or 60 Minutes, that's kind of the process they use, is they use a focused soft light that is usually about 5-6 feet above the person's head, and it's shining down on them. So that's what I'd say, is get the lights up as high as possible, get their chin down, and try to get a soft source. It can be tricky. I'd say about 3 or 4 times a year, I come up to a thing where we just have to work it out, because of the bend of their glasses, because of the space we're in. Usually, there's so many factors, but I would say that is best thing you can do is, also there's always, hey, can you take your glasses off? Because if you don't necessarily, if they're not reading from a teleprompter, they don't necessarily need their glasses. So I'm always sensitive to that, because it might be part of their, their look. It might be something that's their comfort zone. But yeah, so first thing I always try to do is go towards higher light, softer, come at it from slightly different angles to continue that kind of key light. But plan B is always, hey, how important are those glasses to you? And I'd say 9 times out of 10 people are like, I can take them off. So yeah, that's about that.
We have Kim Armstrong from Illinois Central College, I think, asking a question, one I've wondered about. We're getting ready to shoot some videos for orientation, she says, and we're concerned about using old footage with crowd shots. Are we overthinking? We're just trying to set realistic expectations.
So, well, I guess I would wonder why, I guess, is the worry that those students have moved on, or the styles have changed?
Or I think the worry is not representing what people should be doing right now with social distancing.
Yeah. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
And I think that is a valid concern. I think if you could avoid that, maybe right now.
Yeah, I mean, and here's where John and I, we've been business partners 15 years. We don't always agree on everything, but I think it depends on how often you're using it. I would say that that could be overthinking it a touch. In my eyes, I always try to tell the best story. So I would put it together, and if it feels wrong, if there's something in your gut that says, this isn't right for the time, then I'd go back and revisit it. But I don't think we're so far removed that if you need that to tell your story, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's going to be glaring. I don't think people are going to be like, hey, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, you certainly notice it though, because like,
yeah,
even when you're watching a movie these days, and you
yeah.
see people, you're like, wow, there's no social distancing.
They're shaking hands. What's that about? Yeah. So, I mean, it really depends on the project. It really depends on what else is going on. I wouldn't overthink it. I mean, if that's what you've got and that really helps tell your story, tell your story. You've got to kind of pick a lane. And I've come up with other things, similar to that. And, we always try to take a step back and say, what's the best way to tell this story? And then just go in that road, go down that lane, because that will usually serve you best. But I definitely understand what they're saying.
Next up, do you have any suggestions for making student interviews via Zoom more engaging?
I mean, I would say, so are we talking about live stream Zooms? Or are we talking about you film them and then edit them? Because I'm always a fan of post-production. I'm always a fan of editing. I'm always a fan of controlling what your story is. So I would say record the Zoom meeting and then do an edit. Just from a story standpoint, that'll help control kind of what's being said and what's not, because there's always a lot of fill. There's always a lot of unnecessary information. From a technical standpoint, if you're talking about how to make it look more engaging, I would say scout it out just like you would do a normal production. Get a picture, ask the person to send you a few pictures of the areas they have. I'm big on separating people from a background. If somebody's sitting right against a wall, you're gonna see everything on that wall in focus. Put them in the middle of a room, set a computer up on a table, and then everything behind them kind of will fall out of focus a little bit. But going back to key light, go near a window, make sure your face is 2/3 covered, and that way you've got, it's well lit. Don't be afraid to be, relatively close to camera and have an interesting background. Patterns are good. It doesn't need to be in front of a nice picture or a mantelpiece. A lot of times I found that in our shoots, a lot of times hallways are great because they'll have patterns, some kind of pillar, some kind of pictures that kind of go down, some kind of wallpaper. And as those things fall out of focus, it just creates a nice background element. But I mean, from a technical standpoint, I would say, focus on being near a window, ideally, because that's going to give you the biggest, softest, swath of light. And then outside that, if you can, edit it and then post it. Don't post full interviews if you can avoid it, because it's rare that anybody's on. I could call Ryan Reynolds right now and it would be hit and miss on what's said. Even every talk show you watch is edited. Control the things you can control and use those things to your advantage.
All right, we do have another questions coming in, so we will try to get through as many as we can. There are several questions about audio and high quality audio. Number one, what about live mics? They can indeed spread germs, but having a boom operator increases your total crew. If you can address that, and then tied in with that, somebody's asking if you can recommend a good boom mic with a reasonable budget.
Yeah, I can. Just to talk about the reasonable budget first, Rode, RODE, they make a pretty good product. You can even go on eBay and stuff and get used ones for like 100, $200. But Rode does a good job for cheap. We use Sennheisers. It's a little bit of a step up from that, but we used Rode for a long time. RODE, Rode mics, and I forget, the N2 I think was the mic we used, and it's a couple $100. Anything good is going to cost a little bit of money, but it's well worth the investment because you're going to have that for a long time. Now, to speak to quality, a lot of times we have a boom mic that we'll put on a stand. We've got a C stand with a cradle, and if you're looking for a cheap cradle, you can just look fishing pole holder, because that's exactly the same thing. They sell at Walmart for $6. They sell to the film industry for $30 a piece. But essentially, we'll put a mic on a stand, because a lot of times we'll do interviews with only 1 or 2 people, which isn't ideal. But so we'll set up our mic, we'll have the boom, and then we'll go kind of into like, we always run 2 levels of audio, so it's hard for us because we always have a mixer, actual physical mixer, and then we always have a lavalier and we always have a boom, because sometimes you'll have interference on the lav or rustling of the clothes. So we always run 2 levels, 2 different lines of audio. Obviously that's our recommendation, but obviously everybody can't do that. If I could only run one thing of audio, I would do a boom because there's less chances of interference. There's less chances of it being unusable. Now, we probably use, that being said, we probably use lavalier audio more, but the boom is your safer thing. So if you can only run one thing of audio, I would say try to get some kind of boom mic. You can, there are cheap things out there that you can get. You need a decent mic and an XLR cable that goes to your camera, or some kind of recorder, your iPhone, whatever it is. But yeah, that's essentially that's it. Go with Rode if you're looking for something cheap and still high quality.
All right, when it comes to keeping rights to the footage, you talked about that early on. Can you talk a little bit more about keeping rights to footage that a production team shoots and how you reuse it?
Yeah, so essentially that's something that needs to be in the contract phase, because at College Inbound and Port City Films, we have multiple products. A lot of what we do is custom, but we also offer our licenses, our license footage. And when we do that, we don't release it. And that's understood. We make sure everybody understands, you're licensing this for a certain amount of time. 9 times out of 10, if you're if you're hiring somebody to produce something for you and you pay for it, you should get that footage. But that needs to be said in the contract. There's an older school of thought with photography, and back in the day, photographers would come and they'd take pictures and then they would license the photos to you. That's something you see less and less of as the technology grows. So what I would just say is, if somebody's coming to produce, first of all, they want your business. I would say, hey, the only way we're going to sign this contract is if we want a hard drive delivered of every single thing you shoot and any graphic you create for this piece. And make sure that that's actually going to come in, that's actually in the contract, that's actually going to come through. Because if you don't specify it, a lot of production companies will just say, okay, here's the final edit, let us know if you need anything else. And they want to keep it because they'll want to have the files. That way, if you need updates, you have to go to them. You have to, I've never, when we do our custom work, I've never been big on the licenses. I've never been big on trying to hold things close, because in the end, it's relationships. If we're trying to, squeeze every penny out of our clients, then they're not going to trust us. They're not going to know that we're there to work with them. So, but you will see that. We've seen it from other production companies, but I would just say, get in the contract. Hey, when we're done, I want a hard drive with everything that you produced for us. And that way you can use it for other projects. So
that's really important, because if let's say you have a 60-second final product, I mean, that could still be hours of footage that you have.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not uncommon for us to shoot a 30-second commercial. And when we get back into the studio, we'll have 300 gigabytes of footage, and it's not uncommon for us to have an hour worth of footage to make a 30-second ad, but so there are so many takes out there that exist. Now, some of them are garbage. Some of them are out of focus. Some of them have a sound guy picking his nose, whatever it is. You're not gonna be able to use everything, but there will be other stuff in there that you'd be able to use, and repurposing's huge, because there are certain things, outside the buildings, your wide establishing shots, your tight shots of person studying in the study hall, that's not necessarily going to change, so if we're big on repurposing. Whenever we pitch a project, we always talk about, okay, so we're going to make this for you. How else could we repurpose that? Do you want to do a shorter version? Do you want, if we're doing a minute ad, hey, do you want a 30-second version of this as well? We'll just throw that in, because it takes us a couple hours, because we're just kind of boiling it down. But try to think about, how else can we use this? What other versions, is it can we make it a 15-second bumper ad for YouTube or whatever? It's there's so many times that people will create a project and they could be creating 4 projects instead of 1, and they just don't. So.
All right, very good. I'm watching the time. We will take a couple of more questions. I think we've got through most of them, but there are a lot of good questions. We'll take a couple more. And I do want to encourage you, you see Curtis and Jonathan's email addresses that are listed on this slide. So By all means, I know they are more than happy to answer any follow-up questions directly. So please, please feel free to reach out to them after today's live broadcast. But let's take a couple of more questions really quick. One is very basic, but a very good question. How often do you white balance your video camera during a shoot?
Often, every time we move. So if we're in the same room, and if I know that it's one of those things that, especially if you don't shoot all the time, white balance all the time. White balance whenever you reset. If you turn to a different direction in the room, reset. If you do it for a long time, you can just look at your subject and you can kind of know, because it becomes kind of ingrained in you. But I would say it only takes a second to white balance. Definitely white balance in every room. Definitely white balance, and because it's rare, but there have been a couple times a year we'll get a shot that we didn't white balance, or we were in a rush, we were shooting out a window, whatever it is, and sometimes it's really hard to pull it back. You can't always white balance and post perfectly. So I'd say just ingrain that in your process. White balance whenever you move rooms. But if you feel like there's new lights, if you're shooting in a room where you've got the fluorescence and then you go near a window, re-white balance. Any new influence of light, I'd say white balance away, because it doesn't hurt and it only takes a second. And there have been a couple shots in our 15 years that we've just not been able to dial it in, because it does tricky things. So
Okay, could you talk about the best compression for multiple social media use?
We have to YouTube that stuff just like everybody else does.
Yeah. There's so we use Vimeo, Vimeo.com. So when we deliver projects, we give them a password protected link. They go to that. It auto compresses like 5 different versions. The good thing is most of the social media platforms are really getting more robust with the file sizes, so they can handle bigger files, just because your average person who gets a video file doesn't know how to compress things and know how to change things. So we don't know any, there's no secret to it. There's always new things popping up.
Yeah, Curtis is the one that uploads to Vimeo, or our editor does, and then I'm usually the guy that's going out there and I'm downloading the full version, the highest quality version there is, and I'm posting that on the various platforms. So I just like to put the highest quality version that we can put out there possible.
Yeah, I would always start there. I would always go for the highest quality, because most of the, especially YouTube, we always recommend to clients that have a YouTube channel, use that as your base, because they do a really good job with their compression. They do an amazing job with their streaming, and essentially, it'll autoplay to whatever device people are using. So, but the bottom line is, if somebody has a good internet connection, they can sit back and watch the full quality version. That's what you want people to see. That's what you paid for. You brought in a 4K camera, and you brought in a crew to do a good thing. Let people see it at the quality it's supposed to be. So that's what we would say on that.
All right, we'll take one more question. I'm going to take the last one that has come in, and then we'll close things out. How in-depth should scripts be in order to have the voiceover sound more natural than sounding rehearsed or line by line?
Let's see. So sorry, could you read that again for me?
So it's about scripting, and how in-depth should they be to ensure that your voiceover sound is more natural sounding than rehearsed?
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky because every voiceover artist is different. One thing I do is I'll write out my script, and there'll be certain lines that stand out to you that you're like, okay, this is kind of strange. So I'll put alternate. So in red, I put alternate, and I put the new line in, and it'll just be another version. So a lot of times, because when a lot of times they're doing it by word, a lot of times they'll just eyeball it and be like, I don't know, $200. So I'll just throw in 3 or 4 alternate versions throughout, just even if the client You know, even when our clients are like, hey, this is locked, meaning this script is approved, this is what we want, I'll get it and I'll say, that doesn't sound right. Or one of our editors or our, you know, our animator Mark pushes back on that stuff a lot. He's a stickler for grammar. So he'll be like, hey, actually he called me right before we got on here. It was like, hey, this line is weird. And I was like, I don't have time for that right now. But you know, essentially, don't be afraid. You know, when you're getting it recorded, the way I'd look at it is get more than you need. You know, put in alternate versions. If a line sounds weird, you know, read everything out loud. You know, out loud. John and I were doing that with this presentation right before we went live. But you know, do everything out loud, because once you do it out loud, you really start to, you know, hear those kind of awkward phrases and those, you know, just those pieces that don't go over smooth. So just write a different version and just put it right underneath. Make it fit, make it like a puzzle piece. You know, that's what editing is all these things are chopped up into pieces and then you're putting them together. So just make it a puzzle piece that you can use one or, you know, A or B, and just write different versions. That's about the only recommendation I have. You know, using voice over people it's a tricky thing, and everybody's different, and sometimes they're prima donnas and sometimes they're great. And sometimes they're super talented and they just don't get it. It's you know, so it's a tricky thing.
And to help you guys out, we put together a list of production forms in a Google Drive. We have a talent and crowd release form, samples of a script template, shot list template, storyboard template, post revisions form, some COVID-19 guidelines for video production, and a copy of this presentation. So if you go to collegeinbound.com/freebies, it'll automatically redirect you to the complicated Google Drive URL. So.
Well, great. With that, Curtis and Jonathan, let's go ahead and close out. I do know that these forms will be greatly appreciated by those still on the line. Those that pick up the PowerPoint later will also find that link very, very helpful. So thank you for providing all of those templates and samples for the listening audience. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Again, Curtis and Jonathan, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all the time it took on your end to put this presentation together. You had some fabulous tips, both for shooting video during regular times and during COVID-19. And we do greatly, greatly, again, appreciate it. Just a few closing notes. On behalf of NCNPR, thanks to all of you still online with us for joining us. Be sure to visit NCNPR's website for more resources to help you navigate issues related to the COVID-19 crisis. You will find links to our shared resources, to our new podcast, our blog, listserv, and other tools. After July 1, which is tomorrow, we will be resuming our regular paid webinar programming. So watch for more details about those. We already have several lined up, and we'll be posting information about those very, very soon. With that, thanks everyone. We hope you stay well, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.